welcome to another video here on the Critical Focus channel. First off, a big shout out to all my members who support my work and keeps the paint flowing and the electricity running. Members do get access to the member Discord, will influence the content, the matchups, whatnot. There is a join button below if you feel so inclined. But regardless, I am happy for your support in the form of actually just watching the video, of a like and a comment, and if you haven't already, please do feel free to subscribe as well. And if you are looking to buy Warhammer merch, there is an affiliate link in the video description as well. Let's get on with the video. Alright, let's dive into the second Grand Alliance box, and boy, there's some really strong stuff in the KS box, namely Despoilers and the Daemons. I'm going to start with taking a look at the fighter cards of our first warband, the Goral Chosen of Drom, and this warband has seen a 37% rate of players participating in the World Championship take them, which should tell you quite a lot, and I think this warband is not only S tier, but really problematic. Let's check out the fighter cards first. They all sport a single shield on 3 move. Health-wise, we have the leader on 5, Goral on a massive 6, already uninspired, which is a buff from before, and Herax on his old 4. Drom and Goral has a bounty of 3, and Herax 1. Attack-wise, we got Drom on the new standard, basically with this range 2 damage attack, nerfed to only do 2 damage in range 1, while keeping a range 2 but only 1 damage. Goral is more accurate than before, as he started on 2 swords 3 damage before and now has 2 hammers instead, while keeping his 3 damage, while his old strangle attack reflected in the other attack there with 4 hammers 1 damage with ensnare, which is a really good finisher as well. Slap Grievous on that, it's 4 hammers 2 damage, basically an undefendable pleb killer. Herax finally has a range 2 3 swords 1 damage attack, while he does 2 in range 1 with the same profile. Flipping them over, only Herax gets a buff in move, while the rest of the base stats are unchanged for the lot. However, Drom loses his range 1, well, loses in quotation marks, because basically his old range 1 attack goes now to range 2, picks up her hammer and picks up Grievous. That's an insane buff. While Goral gains range 2 on his super attack, which is just insanity as well, honestly. And he can still take that attack to 4 damage with a Grievous slapped onto it, so yeah. Other attack also picks up another hammer and a Grievous. So that's basically the old throttle there. So yeah. And Herax also merges his attacks with the stronger profile, now being 2 range 3 swords 2 damage with stagger as well, which is pretty much a leader type attack for a bigger warband, and for the least prominent fighter here, it's not really a bad attack on its own. This already looks absolutely bonkers, but we haven't seen the war scroll yet, so yeah, stay tuned and brace yourself. First up, let's take a look at the blood tithe here to our left in the middle there. Each time damage is inflicted on a fighter, any fighter, friend or foe, and that's damage from ping cards, upgrades or whatever, or attacks. And then below that we can see Brutal Reckoning, in addition, that tells us that each time an enemy fighter is slain, we get tokens equal to the bounty of the fighter. This means that when we slay an enemy fighter, we gain both a tithe for dealing damage and X amount of tithes for the bounty of the slain fighters. And yeah, once you have 8 tithe, the whole team inspires simultaneously. As you'll all understand, they inspire fairly quickly in most cases, and they all gain a lot from inspiring, and they're not bad up front either. Then we have the abilities Call of Blood, where you can pick 2 fighters without move or charge and push each fighter 1 hex so that they are adjacent. And if you discard 1 tithe before each push, you can then push 2 hexes instead. So yeah, this works for both friends or foes, or any combination of the two. This is insanely strong. Even a 1 or 2 hex push can make or break a game, and the fact that we can do this for both friend or foes and up to 2 for 2 fighters is borderline insanity. Enrage is another once per game, where you discard a number of tithe equal to the round number, so that's not really a big cost either. And then you pick a fighter, friend or foe, and charges. No stipulations that they can't have charge tokens before or anything. So we can basically charge 4 times in the first round, even if you want, and for the cost of a single blood tithe. Absolutely bonkers strong, and yeah, doesn't take an action like before, and paired with some of the cards in the new strike deck, we can pull off even more charges. So yeah, this is very problematic. Final Frenzy as well, which is used immediately after you take damage on a fighter and would be slain. Discard any of your blood tithe and roll a dice for each tithe you discarded, and for each crit you roll, you heal 1. And you all understand that once you roll 4+, you're very likely to find that crit that makes you stay alive. So like the Goral or Drom for that matter wasn't strong enough without a life insurance like this. I'm actually quite saddened by the design of this warband and how ridiculously strong it seems, and especially in the hands of a really good player they will be quite abusive, and I think it's urgent that a nerf on them is addressed. I can't really understand how this made it past the design stage really. Yeah, both some of the stats and some of the abilities here needs to be addressed. I really love these models, they are awesome minis and I would like to play with them more, but reading their cards here under the War Scroll simply makes me shy away from doing so. So yeah, let's move on to something hopefully more sensible. Another meta-defining warband of the past is Ephelim's Pandemonium, which at the end of the previous season was so riddled with erratas that a lot of people sort of shied away from playing them, but they certainly started out very strong. They arrived in Word Hollow paired with Domitan's Storm Coven and has made the transition to Embergard. And contrary to their antagonists in that box, they have made the legal transition to Embergard, so let's check out the fighter cards. They are pretty much all 3 move, with Spawn Maw sporting 4 and Apertrax being flying as well. Only the leader and Kindlefinger have more than 1 defense die up front and all are on dodges. Only Kindlefinger has 2 health, while everyone else having 3 bar the leader, Ephelim being on 4. So still a decently survivable warband, I guess. The leader and Spawn Maw has a bounty of 2, while the other only 1. Everyone except the leader is also a minion. Otherwise there's not really much that stands out here. No weapon abilities, no damage beyond 2, but it's also a large warband, so a total of 4 fighters that can dish out 2 damage is not that bad, even if Kindlefinger only does so with 1 hammer. Inspired Kindlefinger picks up an extra move, but the rest are unchanged. Everyone gets 2 dodge though, to increase their survivability drastically. Attack-wise, Kindlefinger and Flamespooler picks up range 4 on their ranged attack, and most fighters picks up a bit of accuracy as well, with Cleave on Apertrax and Snare on Spawn Maw, but overall a toned down damage from the previous version of them. Let's take a look at the War Scroll. So instead of the full 4-step change sequence each round, we have an abbreviated one called the Glorious Change that lets us inspire 1 minion and stagger 1 minion. Weirdly enough, it as it reads can be the same fighter. If intended or not remains to be seen. And as soon as 2 minions are inspired, the leader inspires as well. The last mechanic on our left side here is the Power Leech, which lets you draw 1 power card if a minion dies within 2 hexes of Ephelim, which is a neat little bonus. So your best bet will be playing a bit cagey with a few of the minions to pull an early round 2 inspired for Ephelim, but honestly inspiring a couple of the minions are way more important than inspiring Ephelim himself, as he only gains an extra hammer in his ranged attack. The abilities then, we have one sort of once per round and 2 once per game. The first one here lets you, after your last action step in each round, if your leader is surviving, raise a slain minion and place them in a friendly starting hex and inflict damage on them until they are vulnerable. Obviously sounds a bit crap there with the vulnerable part, but do note that killing a raised fighter gives your opponent 0 glory. They can still score objectives off of killing them, but at least they can't farm them fully. The first of the once per game abilities is called Fires of Change, and this is used immediately after a successful ranged attack, one of your successful ranged attacks. You give each enemy fighter adjacent to the target 1 warping token, and then after your opponent's first action step in the next round, you remove the tokens from each of those fighters and deal 1 damage. This was something that Flamespooler could do previously, and it's seen quite a nerf here with only being once per game. In most cases this will be a 1 damage ping on 1 fighter or so, unless you play a really clumped up horde warband, so I don't really value this all that greatly. The last one is called Shared Mutations, and this is used immediately after your action step and lets you inflict 1 damage on each enemy fighter adjacent to any friendly minions. This is pretty sweet though, and with some pushes, pre-activation, and maybe an out of sequence move reacting to another fighter moving or so, this could be quite fun, definitely the stronger of the 2. Overall I think they look okay. The race mechanic is certainly sweet, as most of your fighters are sort of one-hit wonders, but that being said, your leader isn't massively survivable, so I suspect he'll get targeted early on. I think they will struggle though versus some really strong elite warbands like we've seen just previously here. And I mean, compared to the abilities on this War Scroll, Drom is just ridiculously strong. Yeah, let's move on. Our next warband is the Dread Pageants, one of my old favorites to play, and I'm happy to see them get a fully fledged War Scroll in Embergard as well. Let's check them out. Move 4, already there, gives them slight edge over most warbands, but Hedonites are supposed to be fast. Defensive wise, they're all on 1 dice initially, with the 2 bigger fights on shields, while Hadsu and Glissette's sports dodge. This is a slight nerf here for Glissette specifically, who were previously on 2 dodge on guard as well, but she has picked up a wound at least, and so has Hadsu, while the leader on 4 and Slakelas on 5. are unchanged. Bounty-wise, the leader is 3, Slake-Lash 2, and the smaller fighters 1 each. Attack-wise, it all looks fairly middle of the road, with Hatsu's old Arrows of Desire reflected with the grapple weapon effect. Inspired, Hatsu and Glisette picks up another defense die, and Hatsu gains an extra hex range, while Glisette gets more accurate. Vasilak also sees his attack going the Drom route there to a very respectable range 2, 3 hammers, 2 damage with Grievous, but I would argue it's warranted here, as Slake-Lash does not gain any extra damage, but rather picks up an extra sword, just like before. I think this looks good, sort of middle of the road, well-rounded and fair. Let's check out the War Scroll. Speed of Slanesh tells us that inspired damaged fighters have +1 move while charging, a situational little buff on an already fairly mobile warband. But sure, it doesn't hurt. We do inspire after an action step if all friendly fighters are damaged, so I guess that means all surviving fighters. Or if there are more damaged than undamaged fighters as a whole. So that'll be very hard versus some warbands, easier versus some of course. If any of those conditions are met, we inspire all of our fighters at the same time. This is a buff from their old 6 wound tokens across surviving fighters, which was quite tricky to pull off in most cases, so I'm happy to see this revamped and buffed here a bit. Ability wise, we see Cruel Pangs transition from a ploy card on to a once per game ping for a fighter holding a treasure token, friend or foe, to tie in with the inspire of course. Very useful. Swift as desired lets us in a power step push each damaged friendly fighter, so this is in most cases a 1 to best case 3 fighter 1x push, and maybe more likely 1 to 2 fighter 1x push, but still not bad. Drown in Pain lets us once in a power step give each damaged friendly fighter a guard token, especially useful on our dodged fighters when inspired of course, less so on Slake-Lash and Vasilak, that's only on a single die each. I guess I would have preferred something more exciting than guard tokens honestly, but sure, it's okay. Gross Hubris finally lets us reroll all the dice in an attack roll if we had no successes. That's very nice. We've all seen those 4 sword attacks for a Slake-Lash find 4 hammers or something, so I'll take it. Overall, they seem like a fun mobile warband with some neat tricks and improved inspire mechanic, which is even more needed now that Glisette especially has lost her initial tankiness, and Vasilak also gains a lot from inspiring as well. Let's move on to our last warband to review in this box. Kagra's Ravagers, way back from the Dire Chasm season, were given a stepchild treatment with an inspire mechanic that didn't quite jive and was impossible to combine with holding objectives. They saw an errata improve them, but never really took off fully, so let's see how they've been handled in the transition. Fighter cards first. All fighters sports 3 move and a single defense die. All fighters except Sarcha on shields. Health-wise, we've seen a bit of a not very logical swapperoo where the cloth-draped wizard has gained a wound while Rasek, with a huge shield and full plate, has lost one. Almost begs the question to if that's an error or not, especially when we see that Sarcha is worth 1 glory while Rasek is worth 2. No one goes beyond 2 damage here, so a nerf to Kagra while Rasek and Kragan is pretty much unchanged. Sarcha's previously very accurate but also dangerous spell attack has simply been replaced with a 3 swords 1 damage range 3 attack. On the inspired side, move is unchanged on all except Kragan, while both Rasek and Kagra gains a shield and Sarcha and Kragan stays on their 1 defense die. This sort of further cements the belief that they've mixed up the health on the fighters. Kagra does gain Grievous and an additional range 2 hammers 1 damage attack with Grievous, which is neat but sort of not very logical looking at the model. Maybe it's reflecting the old Hellfire sword upgrade or something, I guess. Kragan picks up an extra die and Rasek gains cleave while Sarcha gains stagger on both her attacks and picks up a bit of accuracy as well. This warband is tagged as hold objective, which to me seems a bit hard to pull off ideally with 4 fighters, but it does at least tie in with a war scroll, so let's go over it. Raised Realm lets you desecrate a treasure token once in a power step, and it states that a treasure token stays desecrated until flipped. Previously it was simply enough for an enemy fighter to move onto it and stay there for the duration of the power step to deny the desecration, but now they sort of has to move on and stagger themselves with the delve to deny it, so I quite like that. Ritual desecration is used immediately after an enemy fighter is slain if the attacker or target was holding a treasure token. If that's the case, you may also desecrate the treasure token, pretty much just like their old mechanic. They inspire after the last action step in a battle round if there are 2 or more desecrated treasure tokens. So a bit slow, but fairly, I guess, reliable. So sort of a nerf from their older rotted inspire condition, actually. Dark Approval lets you once per game draw 1 power card for each desecrated token. Hardly amazing, but okay. The Eyes of the God lets you once per game pick one of the following abilities. Either you get +1 save when you defend against an attack when you stand on a treasure token, or you get +1 attack when you attack someone standing on one. You'll most likely use the second part most, unless you've already inspired, I guess. Lastly, Ravaging Advance lets you once per game in a power step pick a friendly fighter. Push that friendly fighter equal to the number of desecrated treasure tokens. The push must end on a treasure token and or adjacent to an enemy fighter. Kagras never really got my juices flowing, apart from maybe liking the models quite a bit, but design-wise they always felt a bit clunky and stale, sort of, and I still kind of feel the same. The abilities are all useful and the fighter cards looks okay, but there's just nothing there that makes me excited to want to play them, and I also think there's a ton of other warbands that'll pull off the whole style way better than they will do, and I sort of wished that they had designed them more as a strike or flex warband. I mean, flipping feature tokens could also be kind of tied in with their mechanic of destroying the realms or whatever. That is it for the Despoilers and the entire box. Stay tuned for the other boxes, of course, and do leave a comment as to what you thought of the warbands in this one. Yeah, do like the video, it helps out a ton. Subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye.